thank you very much, Frank, and thank you, IFPRI, for conducting this excellent study and for revealing it here. I've been following it with rapt attention, and I'm honest when I say I'm eagerly looking forward to digging into the book and seeing the details. I want to thank Crop Life, too, for hosting this event and for unveiling this important study. I want to make some brief remarks, but I want to start with a little bit of a story to illustrate what I'm going to be focusing on here. A few years ago, we had a woman from our organization from Malawi at a conference on technology in farming, and it was a study they unveiled, something like this. It wasn't an IFPRI study, it wasn't hosted by Crop Life, but at the end of this study presentation, she stood up in the back of the room and very timidly asked a question. "This is all very interesting," she said, "and you're all very smart, but how will this help me on my 2-hectare farm in Malawi?" And the panel was dead silent, and the moderator, who wasn't as fast on his feet as Frank would be, finally said, "We'll have to get back to you on that." So ever since then, I have been very sensitive to the fact that when I go back and talk to farmers, I want to be able to tell them how they can use this, how this will help them. And I'm very pleased with this study because I think this study marks real progress toward answering a question that we've been asking, I think, for a long time in international circles, and that is the question we all know so well: how are we going to feed a growing population with shrinking agricultural resources in terms of land and minerals and water? And I think this study makes progress toward that. Now, I want to ask how, or I want to talk about how are farmers likely to respond to this study? Because if farmers don't respond, then we don't really achieve any progress because they rely on research to show them the way forward. But if they don't adopt it, it doesn't go anywhere. So I think farmers would say, if I'm going to adopt these recommendations or these possibilities that have been outlined here, especially the 11 steps or parts of them, the biggest question that you have to answer for them is, will this make a return on your investment? If they're going to invest in technology, whether it's new equipment to do no-till farming or precision agriculture, or in seed technology that's going to cost them more for seed, will it give them a short-term and or a long-term return on their investment? Will they make money doing it? Or they might ask, secondly, are there incentives in place of some kind, tax credits or other sorts of incentives that will motivate me to try this out? And then I think as a corollary to that, they're going to say, you know, we may need to also be spending more money on expert opinion, on the analysis of agronomists and meteorologists on how we're farming and what the outlook might be. So there are significant farmer costs to some of these, and they would want to know how that will work for them, whether they can make the investment. There are 13 billion hectares of land on Earth. Of that amount of land, only 10 to 11% is cropland. So 27% is pasture land, in which we raise animals that we eat as well. But world grain output really depends on that small percentage of cropland relative to all the land on Earth. And we have managed to feed an increasing population in the past through technology, especially seed technology. And so from the 50s through the 80s, we expanded grain output by 3 times. Since then, however, our rate of growth in expanding grain production has slowed to less than 2% per year. So our life depends on the cultivation of that relatively small amount of land and it making it more productive. And I think that's a big challenge for us as a society, and it depends on farmers. So what signals farmers to the fact that they need to make some changes to respond. As I said, one thing is pretty obvious: money. Essentially, if you can make some money making these changes, you'll do it. How do we respond as farmers to climate change? That is a lot harder to figure out. And how do we respond to the biotechnology? I want to talk about that a little bit. Climate change, weather and climate are two different things, as I think we've learned this winter, and maybe we'll learn again tonight or tomorrow morning. The climate is getting warmer, but a farmer doesn't necessarily see that on a year-to-year basis on their farm. They'll say, well, we've had droughts before, well, we've had floods before, well, we've had really hot, dry, or hot, wet, or cold, wet weather back in '59, and on and on and on. So they see weather as something that changes, and climate change, although I think most of us know and recognize that it's occurring in the world, isn't something that we can take to the bank or change our farming methods necessarily because we might think it'll be a little bit warmer over the next decade or two. So I don't expect that farmers are going to really farm with a thought about climate change specifically until we get to the point where we can make accurate long-term weather forecasts. When we can get to the point where we'll say the 2014 crop year in the Corn Belt is going to be this temperature average and this degree of moisture. Farmers want something they can really count on, and we're not at that point yet in meteorology, and perhaps we shall be sooner than we think. I don't know. Adaptation to climate change, however, is very quick, especially in the developed countries. And even farmers who would deny climate change would admit that they have responded to it. We are growing corn now near my farm, or actually on my farm in North Dakota, in northern North Dakota, that we never did before, and we're growing soybeans. That's due to two things. One is there have been advances in seed technology that allow us to grow shorter season varieties, shorter season maturing varieties. And the other thing is it's getting warmer. It is about 2 degrees warmer Fahrenheit on my farm than it was 120 years ago. We know that. So these things do change, and we adapt very quickly. Farmers in the developed countries have the ability to adapt quickly because we have all the assets and support systems we need, from universities with extension services and research facilities, to credit availability, to infrastructure that can deliver seeds, chemicals, and fertilizer, to advisors in agronomy. We just have it all. We have a wonderful infrastructure. We have it all in the developed countries. In the developing countries, adapting to climate change is going to be much more difficult because almost none of those structures are in place, and from the infrastructure to the credit availability like it is in developed countries. And so the quickest route to achieving higher production in the developing countries may be through biotechnology. If you can give a farmer a better seed or a better tuber to grow, one that resists spoilage, one that's more productive, et cetera, it may enhance their food security considerably. There, in biotechnology, we run into the issue of controversy because the biotechnology, especially genetic engineering, is in many countries viewed as something that isn't what people want to eat, or the public has a perception that that's a problem. We have moved into an agriculture, I think, compared to a number of years ago, a time when a lot of consumers and a lot of non-farmers are much more interested in agriculture and in farming and in land use than they were in the past. And I think many people, in fact, when I'm at some of these international conferences, view agriculture as something like a public good that should be provided to them, that food is a right and it should be provided, and that they should be sensitive to delivering whatever this social set of organizations wants. For example, just to show I think the importance and the engagement of non-farmers in agriculture these days, we were at a conference, the Global Forum for Agricultural Research, their biannual meeting every 2 years. It was in Uruguay, and there were 2 farm organizations present, and there were something like 300 NGO organizations represented. So I think that in agriculture we have to be sensitive to the debates, we have to engage in them, we have to make sure our voice is heard. Debate is a wonderful thing, and there's nothing wrong with it as long as both sides are aware of the facts when they debate them. As the old saying goes, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And sometimes in agriculture, I wish that some people were a little closer to farming than they are when they deliver opinions on it, but that's maybe another story. I'll just conclude by saying that the role of the World Farmers Organization and of national farm organizations really for their members is to try to advocate for them on public policy, but also importantly to try to look over the horizon a little bit and try to advance, give our farmers advanced knowledge of what may be coming toward them. And I think this study not only shows what's coming toward us in agriculture, but shows a light to find our way through those changes that I'm sure we'll be hearing much more about. And I'm looking forward to telling our members in our upcoming meetings about this study. I'll have to break it down a little bit so that it's a little bit more digestible probably and use some concrete examples, but we can do that. And I look forward to the opportunity to use this study to get it down to farmers and urge them to adopt these practices as may be most practical for them to do. So it's been a very, very revealing to me study, and I can't wait to get it into the hands of our members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Before opening up to the panel discussion here and to your questions in just a few minutes, let me follow up on that. So you walk into your membership or onto a farm with this study or the components of it, and what do you say? Do you say, you know, this is really interesting and there's some really new stuff here? Do you say this helps us define priorities and where we invest? Do you say there are some fundamental new practices suggested by this? Well, I'd be interested as to how you actually present it to a grower.
Well, I think it would.
Of course, it depends where, but you know.
Sure, and I think it would. Yes, it does depend where. Yeah, that's exactly right. But I think I would start in every case by saying, you know, your future as a farmer is really pretty bright here. We have a growing demand for food because we have a growing population. We need to increase our production. There are price signals from the marketplace that go up and down occasionally, but the long-term outlook on prices and income for farmers should be good if we can meet consumer demand. And I think that by looking at this study, and like I said, I'll go through it and find some good examples of where we can do things in different areas, we can help achieve what the public wants and make your future more secure. Every farmer, I don't care if they're in a developing country or a developed country, wants to improve their lives. I've never met a farmer anywhere who said, I want to be a sustainable farmer, or excuse me, I want to be a subsistence farmer for the rest of my life. They all want to progress. They want to provide better things for their family, a more secure future for the farm and future generations. So they all want to progress, and I think that's what we have to appeal to in the first instance, and then show that you know, making an investment, finding a way, if you're in a developing country, to put the credit together or find the sources for the technology you want to adopt. Those become obstacles that you can overcome a step at a time.
Well, it would seem that one of the things that this study does, which is to put this in the context of ROI, right? Higher yields, makes that case for you. You make this in their self-interest.
Yes, that's right, yeah. That's exactly right. Of course, in some of the developing countries, you know, you have to we'll have to start by developing an opportunity for those farmers to get their product to a market. So I think that there's a lot of steps involved in some of these things.